Psalm 29 tells us the voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forests bare, and in his temple all cry glory. The voice of the Lord is synonymous with his power. As we see in the opening of Genesis, what God commands comes to be. His word and will are realized by the mere act of their expression. That's power. I've often had conversations with people who ask how they can recognize the voice of the Lord in their lives. And I get it. The last thing we want is to convince ourselves that that voice inside of us that's so often aligned with our interests and not God's purpose is the voice of the Lord. Like in that case, discernment is important. But if God spoke to us as we read throughout the many places in Scripture, I think we'd have no qualms in identifying the voice of the Lord over our own. Certainly in Revelation, we're not left to wonder. In chapter 16, it's the voice of the Lord that initiates the pouring out of the bowls in verse 1 and concludes this section in Revelation 16, verse 17. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the throne saying, "It is done." The loud voice on the throne, it's the Lord. That said, the message may incline us to recall another voice. Jesus' victorious words from the cross in John's Gospel. In chapter 19, after receiving the wine vinegar-soaked sponge, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And from the cross, the Son cried, "It is finished." From the throne, the Father shouts, "It is done." We could connect the two this way. Salvation was accomplished on Calvary, but in the last days, the Lord declares from the throne the final triumph over all. It's curious to me that with each of the preceding bowls, the impact of the bowl is experienced by that which it is poured out upon. Like for instance, the second bowl poured out on the sea led to the sea being filled with blood. The fourth bowl poured out on the sun led to its scorching with a fierce heat. The sixth bowl poured out on the river Euphrates led to the Euphrates drying up. The seventh bowl, as we read, is poured out into the air. But nothing happens to the air, does it? Instead, we get the following: then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on earth. So tremendous was the quake. Now, we've heard something like this before in John chapter 4, when John witnessed the throne. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. Of course, there was also in verse 1 the voice of the Lord sounding like a trumpet. What's new here is the earthquake. I guess that's not even entirely new. We've encountered earthquakes before in the sixth seal and the seventh trumpet. But this earthquake is unique. We'll look at its consequence next time, but the question remains, is there a connection between the bowl being poured out in the air and the earthquake to follow? The short answer is yes. In Ephesians 2:2, Satan is referred to as the prince of the power of the air. The seventh bowl is poured out against him. Defeating him is what the voice of the Lord ultimately declares done. Of course, while Satan is called the prince of the air, he doesn't actually rule the air. The evil one rules on earth, and no place more so than the great city that is the focus of the great earthquake. More on that next time.